Duncan, David, thank you very much for joining us. Before we go into the proposed changes, just tell us a little bit about what current state of play is with regarding construction design regulations.
Okay, yeah, the construction design and management regulations been in force now since 2007, which was a change from the first set of regulations, which was 1994. Been around for the industry, obviously, for some time. The regulations are there to consider health and safety during design and the construction processes, and places duties on clients, designers and contractors, and two additional functions that weren't there before the regulations: the appointment of somebody called a CDM coordinator and a principal contractor, who are fundamentally there to coordinate health and safety, first of all for the CDM coordinator during the design process, and the principal contractor during the construction process. Okay. So the various phases of the project. There are requirements for certain documents to be produced, passing information around the project. But to summarise the current regulations, they require everybody working on the project to be competent, which really seems like a good idea, that information is communicated effectively, and that everybody working on the project cooperates and coordinates with each other. Okay, so Duncan, new proposals, what is that going to mean?
Well, fundamentally, there's some quite big changes in the pipeline. A particular concern and interest to ourselves is the removal of one of the duty holders, the CDM coordinator, which is a role that we fulfil on a number of projects. That's going to be changed to a new duty holder called the principal designer. And we have a lot of concerns about that, which we can go into a little bit later on. But there are other major changes to clients. At the moment, domestic clients are exempt from the requirements of these regulations. Going forwards, domestic clients or property holders will have duties under health and safety law and the CDM regulations as well, okay. Which is going to be quite a significant change to the way things are done currently.
So there's no duty holder to advise, to assist clients. Where do you guys come into this?
At the moment, as a CDM coordinator, we see our role in two key streams, one of which is working with the design and the design teams, and the second is working with our clients. So in terms of working with our clients, we are there to help advise and assist and educate the clients in their roles and responsibilities under the health and safety requirements. Particularly because the majority of clients out there maybe do one or two construction projects in their whole existence. Right. And as a consequence of that, they aren't expected to know anything about the construction industry. Essentially, they just want the job doing. So we see our role, and legally our role, is to help them and advise and assist them to ensure that they don't fall foul of the requirements that they have. Going forward, under the new proposals, there isn't anybody in that position.
So Callsafe are going to fill that gap, in effect?
Well, in essence, we will fill that gap. There's a duty in the proposed regulations, there's a duty on the client to ensure that this new role, the principal designer, is performing their functions correctly. The client is probably not competent to do that, so is going to need some assistance, which currently is provided by the CDM coordinator. And we see ourselves as a health and safety advisor to the client, to enable the client to assess whether the principal designer, and for that matter the other designers, are complying with their legal obligations. Mm. So there is still a function for us to perform. There just won't be any legal obligations on us to actually do it, which is an interesting concept in health and safety law. Because at the moment we are criminally liable for any advice and assistance provided, and that will not be as clear if these new proposals come into force.
Do you think these proposals and these proposed regulations are going to be detrimental to the work that you do?
I think the general consensus from industry is that it is going to be negative impact. We are at the moment at the forefront of health and safety management across Europe, if not the world, and we've made great strides to reduce accident statistics over the years. We really do see this as a bit of a backward step.
Why do you see that?
Because I don't think that there's going to be quite as much consideration given. There's an awful lot of discussion at the moment, and people are using the phrase that it's going to be a charter for cowboys. And when, especially on the domestic side of things, where you may have a contractor who will price properly to do something, someone else will come in cheaper, and a domestic client is more than likely to choose the cheaper option, and not paying the sort of adequate attention to the health and safety side of things.
Sorry, go on, carry on.
Well, I think that the big problem that we then face is how this is going to be enforced, because it's all very well putting into the regulations these requirements, but the HSE at the moment are understaffed and under strength. They're not enforcing things in the way that I think industry would like them to at the moment, and yet we're opening up a massive, bigger area for them to also be looking at to try and enforce, and we don't understand how they're going to achieve it.
It is proposed at the moment.
It is.
Is it likelihood that it will happen?
So far, we've obviously talked with a lot of people in the industry. So far, we haven't come across anybody working in the industry that considers these proposals to be a good way forward. Some elements we tend to agree with, but the vast majority we think is a backward step. The Health and Safety Executive, the consultative document finished on the 6th of June. I've got to assess all these returns from the consultation process, and we hope they're going to take note of the concerns of the industry. They've done a cost-benefit analysis, which everybody in this industry thinks is based on very little data, and don't believe the figures that they're actually putting forward. So, I mean, my comment, and I've done it in previous presentations, on what do I think about these proposals, and my comment on it is, if we had, this is Callsafe Services, had a health and safety management system as badly structured and thought through as these proposals, the Health and Safety Executive would probably prosecute us.
Who actually makes the final decision then?
The government of the day.
Right. So they will...
But they'll be basing it on the advice that's given to them by the Health and Safety Executive after the consultation period.
Right, and after that consultation period, which we don't know how long that's going to take,
The consultation's
finished, but how long is it likely to be before a decision's made? Have you got any idea, or is that just like a piece of string?
Well, the plan is for the revised regulations to come into force on the 6th of April next year.
Right.
Most people consider that to be not achievable, although the Health and Safety Executive is still saying that is what they're actually driving towards. If there is a need for major changes to the proposals for the revised regulations, then they're going to have to go out for another public consultation exercise, which would probably make 2015 an unrealistic date for them coming into force. So a more realistic date on that scenario would be 2016, 2017. So the industry and the whole thing has been handled badly. The industry is now not knowing what set of legislation we're actually going to be complying with in 1, 2, 3 years' time, which is not good for an industry that is just coming out of recession. The only thing that any business requires is stability and knowing what we've got to comply with, and at this moment in time we don't know what we're going to have to comply with in a year, 2 years, 3 years' time.
So if you were to have your way, Duncan, and if it was your choice now, where would you go with it? What would you do?
My personal preference at the moment would be to keep the regulations pretty much as they are. I think there is a few areas that could be enhanced, and I think on some of the things that have been proposed on the client side would be a good improvement. But essentially, what we've got at the moment is pretty good. And as I say, if it's not broken, there's no need to mend it.
And is that the general consensus across the industry?
Generally speaking, yes.
Yeah.
We know there are certain things that the Health and Safety Executive and the government have got to do because it's come from Europe. One of them is the domestic client issue, but then the HSE is not going to enforce it anyway. So it doesn't really affect anything we're actually going to do. The other thing is that all the regulations, so the appointments of the CDM coordinator, principal contractor, etc., have to apply where there is more than one contractor working on the project. At the moment, it's only when we are on the larger projects, right, over 30 days duration on site, that we only have to do that. We're going to have to change that. We have no choice. But we could make those two amendments very, very easily and quickly without having any great impact on the way we actually do things. And they could come in on next April, and it would not cause the industry a huge amount of concern to adopt those two things.
So I'm guessing then at the moment it's a case of watch this space, is it?
I think it is, and with an election in the not too distant future, I think this is going to become a bit of a political football.
We shall see. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
very much.